It's another brief moment in time. We get to see the change on the timelines. We're shifting, twisting bits of technology, something lifting up the little bits of reality. While the quick trips through the space-time, we're surely a randomly sparking the photons around me. Let the light flow from the heat show when the photons ignite, highlighting yo. Then you'll know it's that time when we force a change in our mind's eye. Ho ho! A little bit lit up with something in us. It's almost like we something else, autonomous, or maybe perhaps it's that missing piece you need. Perhaps it's that simple message you're searching. Perhaps it's just a different time framing. Us giving back the fake you in the mainframe. Getting excited, so are the photons. Don't laminate so we can change the coupon. Let me raise the hash rate, submit the coupon, fake it, replace the rate with my major bags. Grips of technology, like cryptographic money and hashing your life into a set of QRs. It doesn't matter, 'cause this was 3D change perspective. Yes. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
What up, everybody? Yes, that's right. It is me, 3D. We are doing it today. Alright, so what is the full-on with everything going on? Well, you see the title. It might sound just a tiny bit confusing, and I absolutely understand. It's intended to be that way. So I think every marketing company kind of produces some amount of BS. Bull squat, bullock talk, or what you might have call it. So today I want to change your perspective on what marketing wankery really is. But I want to teach it to you using original moon experiments in correlation to what happened earlier this year on the moon. Or guess what? It didn't involve SpaceX. And that's the beauty of it. Like, there's a lot of people out there that have strong opinions on humans in general going to the moon. And there's those same people will then think all the great values of SpaceX, and people don't realize that SpaceX was not the company that made it to the moon since the previous country. They was not the first small company on the moon. And I just now realized I don't have the chat up, but we do have it in. So if you're around anywhere online and you jump in, like our brother up here, Mr. Mojanga, what's up, Rosiv? Let's go, he says. And that's right, that is what we're doing. We are let's going. Because we're going to take old NASA experiments, and that's what EXP, not just experience, but experiments. So yes, they're experience and experiments to kind of help you show how marketing really works. And it's just going to be basically hinting at like one major thing that's commonly used nowadays. So it's not even really something new or whatever. It's so common that you probably don't even see it every single day. And that's the reason why I want to point it out, because there's a lot of people out there, you know, they're putting their time, money, and efforts into things, and sometimes you need to know what is better to invest in. And I don't want the marketing to mess you up. I want you to see through it. So before we get anywhere, I do want to thank the network sponsors and partnerships. Like, I want to thank the organized for teaming up with Bitcoin Live Digital Broadcasting, DB, because you know, Bitcoin Live DB and D Organized, it's a powerhouse combo. I'd see new heights for both organizations. Now, if you haven't checked out the Organized early morning broadcast for their stacks and other topics, that seems to be taking off with every morning going on. I recommend it. Find them on X, Twitter, among other social platforms where you might be watching this today. Now, I also do want to thank our sponsor, which is... Oh, that was actually the wrong button, wasn't it? Here we go. Sorry. We want to thank Shieldfolio for sponsoring today's episode from within a quantum bit, as well as the Bitcoin Live TV network. Now, if you haven't seen a Shieldfolio, well, they're like a little black book that are made from stone paper, so they are fade resistant, tear resistant, and even water resistant. So you know the info and secrets you store within your Shieldfolio will last and survive whatever you throw at it. Now, I personally have a Shieldfolio, and I use it for my website info, contacts, crypto keys, among other things that I want to keep off my computer and offline. So these little black books are pocket-sized and ready to be by your side, regardless of your venture in real life or online. Now, I do want to roll in with the rollness before we go any further, because it is that time. We roll on in. Thank you again, Shieldfolio, for sponsoring today's episode. Now, I do want to keep on moving with what we got grooving, because like the chat says, which I'm about to pull right back up here in a second, it is going to be an interesting episode. It definitely is. We have a lot of stuff set up and ready to go. Now, before we go any further, I just wanted to let you see the chats up. I do want to point out, there is a QR on the bottom of the page throughout the whole day. Same one right there on the top of your screen. When you go there and you visit Shieldfolio, go ahead and grab yourself one. Grab yourself two. They got these really nice little note cards that are kind of new. I really recommend them. Go ahead and use Bitcoin Live 20 to get that 20% off today. Because, you know, it's one thing to watch the ad, another thing to get the ad code. Bitcoin Live 20, 20% off your Shieldfolio today. Now, again, that's only on their website, not if you go to Walmart or anywhere else where you can find them. Go ahead and purchase it. That's just another perk of them being everywhere and available for you. That's right, because, well, we are in the photon of the greater fourth dimension, quantum machine, and I want to show you something different and unusual to change how you may be thinking of something. So let's get into it as we go on. So right here throughout every episode, we always do this. We go ahead and give you a QR on the top of the screen. You're going to see a little QR pop up on any page we have that is accessible right now. So that means that throughout the live stream or in the replay or however you go ahead and see this, you can follow along with everything. Also check the description below for any links you may be needing if you can't use the QR. All right, so well, that's right. We're doing this new thing. We started this a couple weeks ago. We're doing this new thing. Okay. So we're gonna do catch-up deets. Every episode I do where it's kind of convoluted and a little bit confusing, I think it's a good idea to just catch up on what's going on. Where is it at? Oh. So part of today's episode is going to be over why humans went to the moon, specifically. I'm sure many people would say there is not a single reason for all of humanity to reach the moon. But as odd as it may be, there really was actually a single reason. And I want to explain that specific reason to you, to everyone. So I'm not saying it just yet. But now, the other part about the marketing BS is going to be involved with all this. I do mean corporate investor marketing BS, not individual company or marketing or individual marketing, okay, like small companies. Nothing like that. I do mean larger entities where they have large marketing situations, corporate strategies, and other things. Because many people invest in things, and oftentimes that can, that can take a normal poor person and make them middle class. It can take a middle class hard worker, make them upper class hard worker. It can really just take someone from one level and pull them up to the next level, regardless of them. And that's kind of the importance of having investment ability. And we have talked before in the past about coins that are investable and things like that. And I think over time, it really hit me. I needed to prep people who watch, to be able to make those investments. And the more, I guess what it is, I have invested time, not always money, but some money, into things where it ended up being a bad idea. And I've been seeing these trends with space. And there's one trend I don't see anybody talking about. Of course, the very first private company on the moon. And so normally I would start with history, dead serious. I would work my way up to current events, I think with this topic, you kind of need to open the book up to the very last chapter and kind of see the ending in order to stay along. You know, it's kind of boring in some cases, the history. So I'm going to skip to the cool part, and then we'll see how that makes sense with history. So it's a little backwards today. Again, use the keywords, follow along. Now this is the organized. This is the people we were talking about earlier. They have these morning broadcasts and stuff. Love them. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Awesome sauce stuff coming out from them all the time. So go check them out. Tons and tons of fun stuff. We're gonna just keep on moving though. I noticed the page was reloading, so I was like, let's just keep going. So here is a PBS page. Now, one of my ex-Twitter friends at times would post stuff about this specific project we're going to talk about, and I didn't really pay attention to it until most recently, really. And I tried to find their tweets about some of the success and stuff, and I just couldn't find them, so I'm going to head and just use this page to help explain it. So earlier this year, there was or technically just a few months ago, a private lunar landed on the moon successfully to gather stuff for experiments. Well, they also took some measurement data and they did technically some experimental testing there, technically, but for analysis later, basically. And whoa, I thought no one had been to the moon in years, because that's what I always hear, according to this PBS article. It's a little bit different than that. No company has been to the moon. No, companies actually have been going to the moon multiple times since like 2016. But this one, the landing was actually the first successful moon landing by a private company since the last country landed on the moon. So we need to kind of go over a little bit of this article, and it's going to be a little bit more simplified. Okay, so a private lunar landing carrying a drill, vacuum, and other experiments for NASA touched down on the moon Sunday, the latest in a string of companies looking to kickstart business on Earth, celestial, blah, blah, blah. So Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost lander descended from the lunar orbit on autopilot, aiming for the slopes of an ancient volcanic dome and of an impact basin of the moon's northeastern edge of the near side. So, confirmation of success touchdown came from the company's mission control outside Austin, Texas. Cool. You all start the landing. We're on the moon. Firefly's Will, campaign chief, blah blah blah, reported. So, an upright and stable landing makes Firefly, a startup founded a decade ago, the first private outfit to put a spacecraft on the moon without crashing or falling over. Even countries have faltered, with only 5 actually claiming this success: Russia, US, China, India, and Japan. So, about a half an hour after landing, the Blue Ghost started to send back pictures. And one was a selfie, which we'll see in a few minutes. 2 others were area. So, there's a lot of information here that has really nothing to do with any of this. Here's something that's kind of weird that's here. I find it strange that it's here, but I'm glad that it is. It's a big context. The lander carried 10 experiments to the moon. That's the context I was looking for. NASA agency paid $101 million for the delivery of the product returning, and then another $44 million for the actual tech. So it cost $44 million for the lander, the launcher, all this stuff, and to get it to the moon. But they also paid an additional $101 million to get that crap back. And now I say that because here it says for delivery. And when we looked further into it, basically they meant for delivery of the contents from the moon. And there's a spot in here later I actually had to find out how this flyer got to the orbit of the moon, because that's actually important, and they had to pay for that, which is kind of weird. So if we keep going through here, we'll see that they skipped hazards and did all this really stuff. They landed in a specific area. They wanted to get there for a specific time, before problems, blah blah blah, and they were able to handle a lot of this. So on the way to the moon, the Blue Ghost would send back pictures. The lander continued to stun once in orbit around the moon, blah blah blah. So a lot of stuff, right? It was taking pictures of the moon, showing proofs of the Galileo constellation, so they knew where they were at. Then blah blah. So a tall and skinny 15-footer, 4 meters tall, built and operated by Houston-based machines. They due to land on the moon. So it's quite a fairly large machine. Despite the tumble, Institute for Machines lander on the U.S. back of the moon since NASA. Put the U.S. back on the moon since the NASA Apollo mission. Right. Third lander from the Japanese. So this was more context. So a third lander from the Japanese company, iSpace, is still 3 months from landing. They shared a rocket with Blue Ghost from Cape Canaveral, taking a longer, wider route. Like Initiative for Machines, iSpace is also attempting its first. It's for its second time it's hoping to land. First one crashed in 2023. As the moon littered with wreckage from iSpace, with dozens of other failed attempts for decades. So, at the moment, NASA's like the only one getting stuff on there and back successfully. And there was a lot about wreckage on the moon and stuff. And tons of articles you go through are going to talk about wreckage on the moon. They very rarely tell you what some of this wreckage is. In this case, we get to find out that some of the wreckage we know for a fact is crashed landers. Cool. And there's, I think, and I don't remember if it's in this one or another one, they talk about like, well, it's not as bad as the trash we left in the 70s or something like that. And that really got me thinking too, like what trash would be left from the 70s? That's kind of confusing. Blah blah blah. All right, so we're gonna keep going because it says here. Okay, here it is. I have an actual picture. So this is a picture from the landing from the private corporation landing for NASA. That's pretty cool though, yeah? Companies are being formed by nerds and doers to get paid millions of dollars to get automated machines on the moon and back again. So, dead serious. Like NASA paid for the delivery of the moon and materials for the experiments, test analysis. Wasn't SpaceX supposed to get onto the moon first though? Like seriously. I read this article and I thought, that's the first thing that came to mind. Wasn't SpaceX claiming they were going to be the first and they not? What happened, right? Okay. That's what made me then start looking into this, right? So SpaceX launched 2 lunar landers to the moon. What? So a new year of lunar exploration kicked off early Wednesday when 2 robotic landers and a small rover began their journey to the moon. So 3 things. SpaceX rocket lifted at 1 a.m. NASA Kennedy Space Center in Florida, launching 2 separate uncrewed missions to the lunar surface. One of those missions deployed by Texas space company Firefly aims to put Blue Ghost, blah blah blah. Okay, we read about that just now. So the other mission by Japanese company iSpace involves a lander and a micro rover. Okay, so there's the 2 things there. Theirs is targeted for north. Okay. Then they talk about iSpace and stuff. They talk about the model of iSpace's Tenacity rover. Keep in mind, this was SpaceX launches 2 lunar landers to the moon. What it says, right? iSpace lander and rovers are expected to take longer, blah blah. Blue Ghost carrying to NASA science instruments, blah blah. And that's really when they say the tech and stuff. That's some of the tech. There's 10 NASA science instruments. So this is supposed to be a SpaceX thing, and there's very little actually wording around SpaceX, and the stuff that's around SpaceX is like NASA Administrator Bill Nielsen congratulated Firefly Aerospace and SpaceX on the launch, saying that saying on X, the expedition will prepare. So I mean, like they don't even give us the thing where he actually says it. You know, find it. So, and I didn't really care to verify it because it's not that important. And this is not even a real. This is an artist's rendering of what they think it would look like. So this doesn't have real picture. Well, I mean, it does have some real pictures, but it doesn't have anything related to the thing. The thing is SpaceX. None of it is really related to SpaceX. What all does SpaceX really do? Like, for real, what all does SpaceX really do? This article says SpaceX took Blue Ghost to the moon, but PBS says Blue Ghost did it on their own. This is the BS I'm talking about. So one is saying SpaceX launched Blue Ghost. One is saying nothing about SpaceX. Which one is really true? Or what exactly is really true? So I'm gonna go to here. I'm gonna find out here. All right. I always get information from multiple sources. If you check the other sources, it's SpaceX, like the one we were talking about a few minutes ago. It's SpaceX. And if you check BBS's sources, it's just other articles. So what does Firefly actually say? So it said, okay, my thing says read down to the image that states launch vehicle separation, which means I'm going to have to do this, get the images. Alright, so Firefly's Blue Ghost Mission 1 named blah blah launched and performed its first successful commercial moon landing. Blue Ghost then completed more than 14 days successful operations, and just over 5 hours in lunar night of operations. So this achievement marks the longest commercial operations on the moon to date. Period. Blue Ghost mission had approximately 60 days of operations, including 45 days to transit to the moon, and more than 14 days on the actual surface. On our 45-day transit included 25 days in Earth orbit, 4 days in lunar transit, 16 days in lunar orbit. So something got them into Earth orbit, and then they found their way back over here. And you can tell that because it says right here on around 5 and 6, it says launch injection orbit, and then Earth phasing orbit. The launch injection orbit is kind of important because that implies that, well, they're gonna they're gonna gain propulsion out off of or whatever while in space to get into a specific orbit to then slingshot to the moon. And if we see here, in the first hour of launch, there was launch vehicle separation at spot number 2. And if we go over in 8 hours, they made it all the way to 5, which was engine calibration. And then 6 was Earth orbit phasing. That's when it's actually doing all those little loops. And they have little ones showing you that. But basically, they turn on the engine and then, well, they prepare the engine, they go through the phasing, and then boom, they actually launch. So they separated within the first hour from their launch vehicle. Well, not actually their launch vehicle, the vehicle that got them into space. Okay. And it shows you stuff, blah blah blah. So it tells you about it. Where did it say to go to? I feel like I should have already seen it. Read on the image. Yeah, okay, yeah. So just the image. So yeah. So that launch vehicle was very difficult to actually find. No, I just literally went to a different page. Yeah, I just whole another page. It wasn't that difficult. Here's actually the very first picture they took. There's actually them separating from the SpaceX rocket. Now, I think this was a predetermined timed picture because it's timed to specifically blur out SpaceX. Perfect. Here it is. Blue Ghost lander launched on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, successfully acquiring signal and completed an orbit commissioning. So, SpaceX didn't really have anything to do with this. They got them into space, and that is it. Still, SpaceX has not made it to the moon. And I think all of this is really freaking important. And my thing here says the risk redeemed combat following launch vehicle separation. Fireflies, Blue Ghost lander landing. Yeah, I already did. Okay. So I think all this kind of shows why did that one article talk so heavily about SpaceX? Well, obviously SpaceX, right? It only referenced SpaceX information. It was a SpaceX based article. I'm pretty sure they just paid for it. And sure, that does give Blue Ghost a little bit more information about them, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, really, it was a SpaceX article. It was all about SpaceX. It was just kind of bullcrap. So, I then was like, how did SpaceX really win this contract? And why haven't they been like, because I've heard of like people suing them and stuff. We might get into that. I don't know. All I know is, well, it turns out, like, it's a bit more complicated than that, right? Because, like, SpaceX was supposed to do this, right? NASA Friday selected SpaceX to build a spacecraft which will land astronauts on the moon for the first time since the last Apollo mission. This was supposed to be SpaceX. SpaceX was supposed to be the first. Like, they were awarded a contract to be the first America first time on the moon since the Apollo mission. Okay. Here is NASA's plan that was made up to say this is how the contract is supposed to be set up. This is how it's supposed to be set up. This is how things are supposed to be done. Timeline of events. Human lunar landing 2024. Human lunar landing 2024. Crewed lander, by the way. It says on there. Crewed lander 2024. Humans in it. International Space Commercial Port. Here is SpaceX's timeline of the same stuff. Huh? Why is SpaceX claiming they're going to get to the moon crewed years before NASA's claiming it, which the contract's paid for? Also, SpaceX is claiming to be crewed to the Mars in the same time frame ish as they're supposed to just be getting humans to the moon, which they still haven't done, which was last year. So this obvious BS, and I just dropped off the other pages. I've been getting used to just dropping off the pages. Let me see if I can pull that page right back up though. I have it right here. Get the little thing to highlight it like I would like. Here we go. So, in 2024, human landing, according to NASA's data. SpaceX's marketing bullcrap, Mars in around 2024. And like that's not on 2024, so it's very confusing, right? So, very different. Just on how they talk, just how those articles are, way different. So, I mean, at this point, you kind of should be able to see how anything coming from SpaceX is kind of lie-ridden, or it's mostly hope placed instead of reality placed. So let's look at the wiki of the HLS uncrewed and crewed mission deeds. I mean, only some of them, by the way. So to see what we are actually missing, at the moment, we can see that SpaceX can't be trusted with their marketing. Like, for example, the actual timeline is ahead of timeline from the real timeline, which neither one of these timelines ever happened. Like, none of this ever happened. SpaceX didn't do probably any of this, is what it seems like. Seems like is the key word there, though. I mean, because, yeah, like, I can say without a doubt, none of this has happened. There's stuff that should be on here that isn't on here that has happened. So, alright. Okay, so Starship, I'll make sure you guys got that link. And the Starship HLS, or Human Landing System, is the lunar lander variant of the Starship spacecraft that is slated to transfer astronauts to lunar orbit from the surface of the moon and back. It's being designed and built by SpaceX, contracted by NASA at a critical element of NASA's Artemis program to land crews on the moon. Mission plan called for the vehicle to launch into Earth's orbit, where it would be refueled by multiple Starship tankers spacecraft before boosting itself into lunar near rectile halo orbit. How did that make any freaking sense? Man, I know what rectilinear halo orbit actually means. Just seeing it on the thing, it just looks stupid. Rendezvous with crewed Orion, and then be launched from Earth by NASA. A crew of 2 astronauts. And then in the third phase, it would, it was, a crew of 2 astronauts, which would ascend from the lunar surface, stay approximately 7 days, and then return. So, and then they go back to the Orion. So, in the third phase of procurement process, NASA awarded SpaceX a contract in April 2021 to develop, produce, and demonstrate the HLS. An uncrewed test flight is planned for 2025 to demonstrate a successful landing on the moon. Following that test, a crewed flight is expected to occur as part of the Artemis 3 mission. NASA later contracted for an upgrade version of Starship. So, does that mean them getting that other company on the moon counted as an uncrewed test flight in 2025? I don't know. Starship itself has been in privately funded development since mid-2010s. But not just a big contract, right? A couple of contracts. So, basically that's just repeating itself of what it is again. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that they have in here, like a ton of stuff about like what they plan on using, what they plan on doing, all that stuff. The cargo variant versions of things that's been paid for. So mission profiles. The propellant transfer test campaign. As of 2024, NASA expects SpaceX to begin the propellant transfer test campaign, which hasn't happened. We're past March 2025. And it says here, completed during December 2025. How? Hasn't even started. This requires multiple Starship, like we're partway through the summer already, believe it or not. So, a lot of it's a lie. So the lunar, it's a lot of hopium. Prior to the launch of the vehicles, the Starship will configure the propellant depot would be launched into Earth's orbit. So there has to be this other thing up in the orbit just for people to be able to obtain fuel, which doesn't exist. Musk said in 2021 that between 4 and 8 tankers launches would be required. The Government Accountability Office said SpaceX would require 16 overall. I've seen other ones say even higher. I think Thunderfoot said something like 24, 32, something like that. Like it got really, really high. Because you have to like consider the fuel it takes to. There's more fuel needed than what's being actually counted. So in 2024, SpaceX Vice President said the number of tankers would be 10-ish. They just keep like no one really cares because they keep claiming they need more and more and more. They did. That's what it is. They just need more and more and more than what they thought. It doesn't matter because the thing that's supposed to be up there, that they're supposed to be using to fill, you know, for these things to go up there and feel through or whatever, it's not even there. But it doesn't matter, right? But it's still like a big part of all of this. Okay, so then we get into history. 2010s, NASA originally planned to use the Orion spacecraft and the Space Launch System to land astronauts on the moon. Designed Orion capsules, which are inherited from the Constellation program, a defunct crewed lunar program in the 2000s. Last time we tried, but never went, never made it. So it's something that's already existed. We're just going to reuse them. Cool. Alright, so the closest the moon SLS can launch Orion is an elliptical orbit that approaches the moon. NASA's planned Lunar Gateway Station, blah blah blah, to be serviceable by Orion. Descending the moon from something requires considerably more energy than low lunar orbit. To address these challenges, NASA issued a request for proposals and to develop all this extra crap. And they have like all these pieces of papers and graphs and things to say they need this to do this and that and blah 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 blah. Okay. If you want to come back here and look at those, you can. I'm trying. There's a whole lot of bullcrap. There's a whole lot here that doesn't make any difference. This is what SpaceX said they're going to do. This is what SpaceX said they're going to do. This is what SpaceX said. This is how much money NASA gave up. This is how much money NASA gave up. This is how much money NASA gave up. And even right down here, something that started freaking me, like started ringing a bell that something is awry that we're not being told. NASA selected only Starship HLS for crewed lunar lander development, plus 2 lunar demonstration flights, 1 crewed, 1 uncrewed. No earlier than 2024, which never happened. The contract was valued at $2.8 million. Or billion, my bad. Over numbers of years. So they were supposed to land the first crew, blah blah blah, doesn't matter. NASA had previously stated that it would prefer to fund development of multiple things with this missile capabilities. However, only one design was selected due to significant budget constraints for the human landing system. No, I did not quote that. That was not a direct quote. Cut that down. Alright, so Dynetics, HLS, and Blue Origin integrated lunar vehicle, as well as landers from other companies, would be eligible for later lunar landing contracts. I think that's important. It's saying that it awarded the lump sum of money it had for these types of lunar contracts directly to SpaceX. And Dynetics, HLS, and Blue Origin. But more money would be later on usable for other contracts later. And it ended up being the other contracts later that got to the moon. Ended up being the other contracts later that used way less fuel, way less time, way less everything. And it took exactly 1 rocket to get 2 objects that are going to hopefully both get on the moon. And 1 actually did get on the moon before SpaceX. They use a SpaceX rocket to get to space, which apparently SpaceX can't do that. And then they used their own system with way less everything to propel themselves to the moon, which most of this article is about how SpaceX wants to propel some other giant object to the moon with lots of fuel. And they don't even know how much. It's a lot of bull crap. The more there is to tell the story, like the more you have to basically say simple little things, get to the moon. No, we're not just going to get to the moon. No, you don't understand. We got to have this thing out in space, and we got to go up to that thing, and we got to fuel that. It's going to take time. We're going to send rockets. Everyone's going to send rockets. Everyone's going to send rockets. Blowing tons of fuel to get fuel out in space. Dude, someone else did it. Sure, it was not crewed. It was uncrewed. No people on it, but they did it, and before SpaceX. But SpaceX was given, so like there's a lot of bullcrap. Just looking at the fact that SpaceX was given the majority of a contract, and 2 other companies are a part of that contract too, but you never hear anything about it. Well, then later on, other contracts would be allowed. Well, that's obvious bullcrap. There's something awry there. One company shouldn't be given the full bulk of all this. You know, like why wasn't it split between those 3 companies evenly then, right? So it makes less sense, really. So opposition by competing companies. So on April 26, 2021, Blue Origin and the Dynetics separately filed formal protests of the award to SpaceX to the GAL. The GAL rejected both protests and found that NASA did not violate criminal law and awarded the contract to SpaceX, who bid a much lower cost and more capable human and cargo lunar capability for NASA Archimedes. Keep in mind, none of that it seems to be true. It's costing them 3, 4, 5 times more money and has taken 0 objects into space, literally had cargoless failures explode not in space yet. We're just about to be in space. We're just at the edge of space. So, soon after the GAL rejected the appeal, NASA made its initial $300 million contract to SpaceX. Protest action. Now, that's the other thing. They talk about how this is going to delay SpaceX 95 days. Okay, that was still 4 years ago. And at the time, one of the reasons why they were complaining is all the stuff that SpaceX claims they need to use, cryogenic fuels and all these, none of it exists. Like, the shit they're wanting doesn't even exist. But apparently, that's not enough. Well, it gets worse. There was more lawsuits challenging this award proposal and it was unsuccessful. But it just keeps going. And it's going to keep going because, well, now a completely other company for America got to the moon before SpaceX could. And there's so much here about simply like the delays and the other companies hindering SpaceX, and this whole thing sounds pretty much like a hit piece paid for by SpaceX. And if you look down here, you see the very first one, SpaceX, and we got some NASA. There's a lot of NASA in here. But at the same time, what is like this referring to? Not very much stuff, right? Not one thing that we really read. We see a lot of like articles with Elon Musk. So Elon Musk is being referenced as a direct reference. Elon Musk is a direct reference here. Okay? Elon Musk is a direct reference. So, and again. So obviously it's a hit piece. The whole fucking article is just a hit piece about why everyone's mean to SpaceX and why SpaceX deserves this money. Doesn't make any sense, especially since it's all in the past. All of the endpoints are in the past. None of it's true. None of it is true. Very much a fail. But this made me go, who is Blue Origin? They were awarded part of contract that SpaceX was awarded as well. What's this? Blue Origin and SpaceX among winners of NASA technology agreements for lunar landers and launch vehicles. So you telling me that rocket that was actually invented forever ago, that launched 2 objects into Earth's orbit so they could be launched off of that into space to then go to the moon, way less fuel than anything SpaceX is saying, is actually a part of this agreement? So not only did NASA award these companies money to be launch vehicles, they then had to, them and another company then had to pay SpaceX to be a launch vehicle to get into space. What? It is just a scam. And there's their scam vehicle right there. Yes, Blue Origin is the other company to obtain funds from NASA to develop the means to launch vehicles to go to the moon for space travel. So the point of question later is, why is NASA wanting to go to the moon again? Why did we do this in the first time anyways? Well, let's continue looking into the origin of Blue Origin. Because maybe there's something hidden in there. So, Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket completes 31st mission to space. This is how everyone knows Blue Origin, without them realizing they actually know Blue Origin. So, Blue Origin is specifically profiteering off of NASA's contract. SpaceX is doing something similar, but it's more like stock manipulation, so to speak, with NASA contract. And this is something else that we're not seeing, right? SpaceX basically isn't doing the experiments they promised, or at least only did some. So some of the stuff that SpaceX promised was being launched. That happened this year. Okay. Supposedly, SpaceX has been testing machines and those exploding rockets. But Blue Origin has had its 31st crew, has its 31st mission to space. This one was crewed with people on it using unique technologies that is not actually new. Just updated. And this is the one everybody remembers. This is the full female crew. And even I remember these ladies at some point said they were doing experiments that some of the original space missions that NASA did were doing. Ooh. That kind of gives out a lot of information. Like, a lot of information. So, I wanted to know more about these experiments. 6 suborbital research payloads fly on Blue Origin's New Shepard. Wow. I think this was one of the very first ones they did, and this was in 2016. MIT lab set its sights in space. Just over 3 years later, the Space Exploration Initiative has grown to over 50 plus students, staff, and faculty. They recently launched 6 payloads into space to come back. These payloads shown below crossed the 100-kilometer Karen line and are being tested and researched during these 3 minutes of sustained microgravity inside the Blue Origin's New Shepard experiment capsule. That's that thing that we were hearing about earlier that was invented a long time ago that was being reused. They talked about that in a SpaceX article to find out Blue Origin's actually the ones using it. There's that technology Blue Origin didn't actually create, or maybe they helped create or something like that. There's that thing SpaceX said they could not use that is being used. Whoa. That's when it should make sense. It's not. SpaceX is cheating the system. They got the most amount of money to do the least amount of work. The SpaceX has to test physical machinery to do specific tasks for things that probably will never happen. While this company is sending actual tests into suborbit and testing, having experiments done. They are sending people out and doing experiments. They are actually doing experiments for the least amount of money, so to speak. There's actually someone making more or less money than them, which I would say are doing more money, more work. Now we're going to kind of get back to the point. We're going to watch this video. I do have a backup copy link in case you can't watch this. I have problems watching some of this stuff on Wiki, but I'm going to watch this. It's not very long.
Well, in my left hand I have a feather. In my right hand a hammer. And I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the moon. And so we thought we'd try it here for you. The feather happens to be appropriately a falcon feather for our falcon. And I'll drop the 2 of them here and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? It proves that Mr. Galileo was correct in his findings.
Did you know that? Did you see and hear that? Turns out one of the main reasons to go to the moon was to prove gravity existed. Was to prove how things interact in vacuums. There was actually 6 major factors that they wanted to prove. Another of which is just a method of bouncing a laser off the moon to actually be able to calculate its distance in real time. Now, I do have, like I said, a backup. Here is a backup link on YouTube of pretty much the same video, maybe different quality. Definitely some different things about it, but it's mostly just like overlays, not the actual video, but the quality is a bit different. So. I want to talk a little bit about Apollo. There's someone walking on the moon right there. So Neil Armstrong, we're going to go back and read them. Oh, I just wanted to give you guys that picture. Look at it. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins departed from the moon 50 years ago. This was some time ago, by the way. But one of the experiments they left behind continues to return fresh data to this day. Arrays of prisms that reflect light back towards its source, providing plentiful insights. Along with Apollo 11 astronauts, these of Apollo 14 and 15 left arrays behind as well. The Apollo 11 and 14 arrays have 100 quartz glass prisms called corner cubes each, while the array of Apollo 15 has about 300. The longevity of the experiment can be attributed to the least in the part to its simplicity. The arrays themselves require no power. 4 telescopes at observatories in New Mexico, France, Italy, and Germany literally fire lasers at them, measuring the time that it takes for the laser's pulse to bounce off the reflectors and return to Earth. This allows the distance to be measured to within a fraction of an inch, or a few millimeters. And scientists at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory actually analyze the results. The orbit, rotation, and orientation of the moon are actually determined by the lunar laser ranging. The lunar orbit and the orientation of the rotating moon are needed by spacecraft that orbit and land on the moon. For instance, cameras on the spacecraft in lunar orbit can actually see the reflecting arrays, relying on them as locations accurate to less than a foot or a fraction of a meter. Laser ranging measurements have been deepened our understanding of the distance between the moon and Earth as well. Like the moon orbits Earth at an average distance, but the lunar laser ranging has accurately shown that the distance between has actually increased over the years, and actually about 1.5 a year. So tides on the Earth's ocean are not actually highest when the moon is overhead, but hours later. It's kind of like a faulty climb. And they figured out why, thanks to the stuff on there. In a similar way, how gravity's tugs on the moon, Earth's tugs on the moon, the two tidal causes bulges in the lunar rock. In fact, the positions of the reflecting arrays vary as much as 6 inches up and down each month as the moon flexes. Measuring how much of the arrays move has enabled scientists to better understand the lexistic properties of the moon itself. The measurement that is thus called now the love number, named after the H-E-M-A-E-H, love, the Lovecraft. So, analysis of the lunar laser data does show that the moon has a fluid core. This was a surprise when discovered 2 decades ago. Most people don't even know about it to this day, because many scientists thought the core would have been cooled and solid. The fluid core affects the direction and space of the moon's north and south poles, which have lunar laser detects. Now, Einstein's theory of gravity assumes that gravitational attraction between 2 bodies does not depend on their composition. The sun's gravity attracts the moon and Earth, and this attraction depends on the composition of the 2 objects. It would affect the lunar orbit. Each contains more iron than the moon. Earth contains more iron than the moon, by that. Analysts of the data of the lunar laser ranging experiments finds no difference in how gravity actually affects the moon and Earth due to their makeup. The North Pole's Polaris is nearly overhead at Earth's North Pole, and the pole changes direction compared to the stars due to the gravitational pull on the moon and sun on Earth's shape. The diameter of the equator is larger than the diameter of the poles, so to speak. The poles will trace out circles in the sky, returning to the North Star in about 26,000 years. This motion of the North Pole succeeded and measured by the lunar laser ranging. So we're actually able to prove that it does do this circular motion pole, like it just keeps going back around and around. And it's a very large cycle. With renewed interest with the exploration of the moon, NASA has approved new generational reflectors. So basically just putting reflectors on the moon in very specific spots over time has allowed us to track things about the moon and learn how the poles on planets actually work and how gravitational pull works between moons and planets together. Well, that means we could probably be a little bit less worried about our stuff. Maybe that's probably why everyone was a little bit less worried when we knew that our Earth poles was moving, and most people were like, well, it doesn't affect anything else. Why is it going to affect? Well, there's a reason why we figured that out. It's not actually from just guessing. It's from long-winded testing for 2 decades over one of the most simplified experiments that could ever be done. Put something shiny on the moon. I think one of the first things that they did was like a camera lens, because it has one of these built into it. And believe it or not, this article actually references one of those camera lenses as one of the reflectors used. But also, that is sometimes called space trash. And that's what I'm saying, like, all this stuff, man, is so complicated. And it's not complicated because it is complicated. It's complicated because of the marketing. The marketing is what makes it complicated. So we know about some of these experiments. I want to go over this little package, which is actually an online learning resource for the state of Hawaii and its islands. I want to kind of look at the pictures first, because growing up, I was always told astronauts left trash on the planet and reflectors. But what many won't tell you is that some of that trash was left on purpose. A, to prove we did it. B, to remove weight from the returning craft. And C, at times, reflect light. If a teacher had ever told me that astronauts left a camera and a cover and instruments instead of trash, probably would have had a higher respect for the lunar landings. Did astronauts leave trash like real trash? Yeah, they left waste materials of plastic. But that plastic will break down, especially in the environment it's on. However, though, the metals of the objects in the Apollo 11 landing image won't degrade as fast in the environment. However, we came to learn the discoveries of the moon. Now my ranting of how what was left was described by many children for 40 years as trash when it wasn't even actually trash. Let's look at this stuff. Okay, so the Apollo 11 mission showed that the moon formed hot. It was magnetically active for at least 800 million years, and the surface blanket, dusty rubble contains a treasure trove of evidence of how the moon was formed. Look at the pictures first. Alright, so this guy's leaving a footprint. We can see here they are literally putting instruments on the moon. Like we can see the flag, we can see instruments, we can see other little things which are guider lines. So here is where the landing site was done. There's the camera. We got the LM, that's one of the instruments. The discarded cover, the PSEP, and the LRR. So the LRR, the LM, and the PSEP, those things, they're all instruments. The discarded cover comes from, I think it was one of these, I couldn't remember. And the camera was actually used, but they didn't need the camera anymore to use it for film. So the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter camera image of the Apollo 11 landing site, which traversed the mark by astronaut boots. Like basically, if we had a much better, clearer picture, we could see all the astronaut boots in it. LM is the Lunar Module Eagle. PSP is the passive semantics. So they got information on what all that is if you really want to learn more about it. Eagle did not sink in a sea of dust. So I think this is really an important part, as odd as this is. The Eagle has landed. He did not say, oh my god, we can't see out the windows because we sank into the dust, send help. In truth, few scientists and engineers involved in the Apollo program thought the lunar surface was so dusty and fluffy that the spacecraft would sink through it. But there was one persistent astronomer, Tommy Gold, a professor at Cornell University. Gold envisioned that fine powder was levitated by electrostatic forces and flowed downhill to accumulate in the lunar maria, making the maria not merely dark and low-lying lava plains, but hazardous dust bowls. The hypothetical thick dust acquired the nickname gold dust. Gold always formed or followed through his ideals, doggedly as they are, and never gave up on them even after the Apollo 11 landed safely. Neil and Buzz did not sink up to their knees. They did leave giant footprints, though. Alright. The concept of gold's dust aside, before Apollo 11 landed, we did not know certainly what the surface materials was actually like on the moon. Lunar scientists were sure that it would be fragmental because of the impact on the moon. It's got a lot of craters, right? So they knew that there was impacts range from different sizes, so the dust materials probably be different sizes. Now I wanted to point out it's called regolith, is the name of the fragmental layer. But as you can see, like even when he steps in, it's made of solid rock, so it's gonna form down and become solid eventually, even if it's so fine. It's still gonna become solid eventually. So, an ocean of magma and a hot origin of planets. Before Apollo 11, the prevailing ideal that the moon was the terrestrial planets had formed cold, and that the moon had remained cold and undifferentiated. Harold Urey, a Nobel Prize winner for discovering something, and basically the founder of cosmochemistry, was a particularly convincing and articulate advocate of cold moon. His book, The Planets, Their Origin and Developments, published in 1952, was through a quantitative look at the solar system formation. The predictions form a cold origin where lunar rocks ought to resemble chondritic meteorites, unmelted primitive objects. Cold origin prominence also predicted that the Maria were undifferentiated, perhaps acquiring their dark color by impact processes. Many geologists who had studied lunar orbiter images did not agree with this view, though there appeared to be flow boundaries, so there were areas where they kind of didn't, like those seen in the lava flow fields on Earth. Oh, okay, no, there was images showing some kind of flow like we see in lava flow fields. So, in addition, one of the robotic people of the Apollo mission landed in the Mare something. It carried a device called alpha particles scattering instruments to measure chemical composition of the regolith. Finding it was roughly basaltic in composition, nothing like chondritic meteorite. Nevertheless, the ideal of cold moon swayed. And it swayed. People still believe there's a cold moon thing, even to this day. And we have proof there's lava, like this little thing right here. 652 macrometer across and polarized light, a thin slice of one of the microlized rich particles studied by John Wood and his team. It just shows you, it's like this, the way the colors are intersecting and stuff kind of proves that it was formed hot, and this is how they're looking at it now. So this is super important, because there are people to this day that believe, none of that was ever hot. And I just think that the whole gold dust thing. I remember Gold Dust, the wrestler, did not realize this is where he got his name from. It's kind of cool. But it's a little bit more insane to know that 3 things NASA wanted to prove to professors and people who worked at NASA. You could step on the moon. The moon was hot at one time. And even though it is the way it looks, it does move. And we have proven all that so far. Like, they really have. It took 2 decades to kind of prove some of it. They have proven it. So what is this? Again, remember, I said we were starting with current times and working our way backwards. A lunar surface experiments package. And so, if there's a truth or a self-observable truth, then the truth will repeat itself. Let's read the wiki about, the lunar surface experiments package. ALSEP. Sorry, I got some burps. Alright, so it comprised a set of scientific instruments placed by astronauts on the landing site of each of the 5 Apollo missions. Okay, so these are like sets of experiments and things that we'll read and test and do things like that. And some of this we have information on. So they have passive lunar seismic experiments, so they're seeing how much it vibrates and shakes and all that. Surface, same thing, basically seeing how much the surface moves in comparison to underneath the surface. The solar wind, how much wind is actually being produced, how much energy can be produced. That is the wind out there. The thermal ion detection to see if that was an actual thing, which we now use for actual type of space flight. Heat flow experimentations, low energy solar wind, charged particle lunar, blah 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 blah. Using ion particles to move around inside the environment on the moon, not just motors, not electronic. Like we need to use ion engines to move on the moon. They wanted to be able to do it on Earth, yeah. More active seismic experimentations and stuff. I mentioned things like real life, like catching them alive type stuff, and then also isotopic power system, testing that setup. Ended up being very successful, if I remember right. There's a lot of stuff going on in here, and I think there's a lot of really neat stuff you guys can come back and look at. Like they got pictures on how they had to open up the stuff, how they had to get everything situated and stuff, and I think that's kind of cool stuff that you never really hear or see about. And it's kind of neat that like here's what it looked like on Earth versus here's what it looked like in real life. It's such a huge difference. Here's some of the actual machines and stuff. So if you want to know what it is, what it's actually doing, you can come to learn more about it and stuff. It's kind of neat. This one looks like a flower or whatever. Really cool. So there's a lot of really neat testing being done right to this day on the moon. To this day. And so like, here's the LLR and here's the EXP. Oh yeah, this thing had a cover. For sub package, blah blah blah. So tons of information, and we're not going over all of it. I just kind of wanted to show you guys like the amount of experimentation, the amount of information on the experimentation, what was used, so much information here. Even showing the difference between like what it looked like on Earth versus what it looked like on the moon. Like it's hugely different. Yeah. And there is, believe it or not, the sun coming up over the horizon. Yeah. Little things, man. Little things. I just like I could see how to some people this is trash. It's a solo cup. A solo cup. I mean, it's not really, but it looks like a solo cup. Like I can see how people say, "Oh, yeah, that's trash. They left trash on the moon." But it's not trash, is it? And so this really helped them show how bad it really is, what people are saying. Like, yeah, we did leave a little bit of actual trash, blah, 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 blah. But nothing like at all what anybody is saying. So right now, hopefully you're a little, at all, of the amount of stuff actually done on the moon. Even to the Firefly experiments done on the moon just a few months ago. This whole time going to the moon was about performing experiments. So why didn't many people know this? Well, the marketing of it all. Even looking at the original few experiments done on the moon was nearly impossible. Growing up, I was told that there was like 6 experiments done on the moon. I was never told even about the hammer and the feather. Even in high school, my science teacher, whom was a priest in the U.S. Army, never said anything about this vacuum experiment of the hammer and feather. So we saw a video of a guy in the 70s creating a vacuum inside of a tube, putting the hammer and the feather inside of it, creating the vacuum, and then flipping it, and we got to see it fall at the same rate. Instead of just showing us it being done on the moon, would have been a huge difference. Honestly, showing me the moon version as a kid would have been dramatically different. And then again, so would have actually done it myself. Like, if I could have just done that myself with the tube and all that, instead of watching the videos from a guy doing it in the 70s. One of the articles we pointed out there was a professor that really thought the dust on the moon was like a river, like water flowing, and stayed in the flight of reality he believed in, even after people landed on the moon. Some people, once their mind is made up, they won't change directly. Sometimes all you can do is show them the different perspective and let them change slowly. Now, looking back at the articles that were SpaceX specific, talking big talk about SpaceX's own public chart when they would do crewed missions to Mars, was a lie. And almost 2 years just comparing it to the chart, and it was a lie by almost 2 years just comparing it to the chart that was presented by NASA, with NASA over the contract details. When we looked at Blue Origin stuff, it was the same. Even just going to the Blue Origin website, it was one big ad, one big paid ad to go to space. Profiteering is everywhere. Profiteering is everywhere. So how do we see past it? Well, it's actually really simple. What, whom, when, where, why. 5 questions that have to be answered. Have to be answered. And if they are answered, they should be in some form aligning with each other. So, for example, on Firefly's mission report, it clearly states all of these. Blue Origin only answered some of these, and SpaceX pretty much never answers any of these, even if they did lie when they did answer something. So technically, SpaceX answered one of these. Earlier with the NBC versus at PBS, why did NBC make it sound like SpaceX was put on Blue Ghosts? Oh, anyway, why did it make it sound like SpaceX put Blue Ghosts on the moon when all SpaceX did was launch them into orbital launch points? PBS was honest and did leave SpaceX out of it, but it's obviously why. SpaceX had little to do with the mission and was most likely paid by Firefly team or company handling their payments, including NASA, to be the delivery driver to space. So PBS didn't mention whom delivered Blue Ghost to space because that doesn't make sense to mention the delivery service, especially since PBS was answering the 5 questions of private lunar lander successfully touches down on the moon, which ended up being the title, right? That answered it. They named private company whom did have the successful landing on the moon, which since the last country, which was not either company paid originally to get to the moon first since the last country. They named when, not specifically because it's still a partial origins right now, so it's like current events really, and was written in that retrospect. Where was on the moon and in space, why was it even mentioned, right? Like when you look at the SpaceX article, like why was any of that even mentioned? Like they didn't mention the experiments, they collect data, they didn't collect the materials, they didn't mention any of that. It was just kind of like, why didn't SpaceX articles or the Blue Origins articles answer any of this? They just kind of marketed themselves, and that's it. And really, that's it. It was marketing. Even the Blue Origins are very secretive on what experiments they're actually performing. And to be honest, I only heard in a video by some of the women in that all-women spaceflight say they were performing experiments done like the first astronauts. I couldn't actually find any proof of it or any article that would state it. And this was only a few months ago. So to cut through the marketing BS, we just have to answer all 5 questions. What, when, where, whom, why. And they have to align. It has to kind of make sense after it's been answered. The legitimacy is got to be there. If you cannot answer these and they don't align or make sense, it's BS. Much like that Professor Gold and his belief, the cold moon rock water belief. Much BS has much to back it up. Like Professor Gold's electrostatic lifted solid rock particles moving like water flowing to the lowest point. In the end, with all the data, it doesn't actually make sense though. Like, when solid rock particles combine under force, they are still solid. So, even if there might be some electrostatic force under it, the force above it outpowers in the lower force, and the upper force will win. But turns out solar winds do exist, which help prove black holes, which has actually been created in the lab since then. Like, if people just believed what this Cornell professor kept spewing, that a heavier force would not overpower the electrostatic force being produced by the moon that was cold and unmoving, according to his science, we wouldn't have known that solar winds were real. We wouldn't have been able to obtain information and knowledge that has allowed us to actually prove black holes are real, because black holes wouldn't exist without solar wind. Like, solar wind is created by black holes and white holes, suns, forces, all this stuff, right? Well, it's kind of like, if there is no solar wind, there's probably no black holes, and vice versa. Having one proves the other. Well, proving the fact solar winds existed with a freaking flag and some of the other stuff they have up there. Well, one day, 2 decades later, allowed scientists to create black holes in a lab. So, yeah, okay, sure. I'm super glad we didn't believe that crazy gold guy, the gold dust that could have been. And imagine, we probably wouldn't even have half the type of technology we have right now, because much of the technology we have right now is relying on that information that we use to create the black holes. And what I mean by that is, a lot of this technology we have today, 100% was reliant on getting to the moon. All about experiments. All about testing. That's all science is.
Yo, did you think you know? Did you think you hold? Did you think something new? That's the goal, to see from a new degree and get the change your mind needs to find something new. Life suddenly is easy for many, but when a wall appears, sometimes up is all you see. So let 3D guide to the side, yo, where there's a door though. Just be careful on your way out, for the first step is a do-si-do. A little bit Linus with something different, it's almost like he's something else. And regardless of maybe, perhaps it was that missing piece you was needing. Maybe it was that simple message you was searching. Definitely it's just in different times, a defraying our mental mind state, separating us from our own mental mind tank. Boom goes the blast of thought. Boom goes the last spark with part. Boom goes the mental mind tank. Don't your perspective hit on the way out. Don't let your directive stop you when you doubt. Don't let the dire detection stop you from being getting excited. So the photons are delighted. Don't hesitate so we can line up the hash rate. Let me surmise the time, submit the rate, and reduce the fakes while we mine our major banks. Crypto technology like cryptographic money, while hashing your life into a set of QRs. It doesn't matter, cause this was 3D changes perspectives.
Thank you for joining the show.
Please return next time for a new role of perspective. Thank you for joining the show.
Please return next time for a brand new perspective. Of perspective.
Thank you for joining the show.
Please return next time for a brand new perspective.
Thank you for joining the